You can also listen to us on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/The Clock Cleaners. Hello and welcome to the Clock Cleaners podcast. Normally this is a two-man show, but I couldn't pay Matt to watch Global Force Wrestling. So tonight's going to be a solo show from Global Force Wrestling Destination X. So I was a big fan of TNA back in when it debuted in 2002, I believe. Their pay-per-views that they did weekly leading up to their Impact shows on Fox Sports, I believe. Then later on into TNN. I kind of lost interest in wrestling for a while. And up until recently, didn't think much about TNA, Global Force Wrestling, whatever you want to call it. But I decided one night to give it a shot, and it wasn't so bad. So I decided to do this review because I kind of wanted to give a different opinion on the thought that this was garbage, because a lot of people think that this wasn't very good wrestling and things like that. So I figured, why not give it a shot, and maybe you can sway people's opinions. So we opened the show with Mackenzie backstage looking to get a word with Bruce Pritchard because he was coming out to make an announcement on the new Global Force Wrestling champion, or world champion, because Alberto El Patron was stripped of his title due to the incident with Paige, and, well, he's been nothing but problems. His personal life, I should say. So she opens his office door, and she sees a figure move toward the door, and it shuts. And she says, "You won't believe who's here tonight," which I was spoiled because I knew who was going to be here. But we'll get to that when we get to that. So our opening contest was Sienna with KM defending her title against Gail Kim. Guess Gail Kim made her return last week to I guess shut up Sienna. I guess that's what it was. Like I said, I haven't been really into the product for a while, so I just started watching it last week. So this was a decent match, though. The announcers kept making reference that Gail Kim's been out for probably about 7 months or so. So she really hasn't been in the ring, and they were basically saying that ring rust was probably going to be a factor here, which surprisingly it was not. Gail Kim looked really good throughout the match. They had a lot of back and forth. Sienna controlled the majority of the match in the beginning. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Gail Kim controlled the majority of the match. Sienna kind of went to collect herself as she got out of the ring, and Gail Kim basically played into her game, and she picked her up and dropped her on the steel steps. Gail went back into the ring and hit Sienna with the Eat Defeat. KM ended up getting up on the apron and distracted the referee. At this point, Taryn Terrell apparently returned, and she hits a cutter on Gail Kim. Sienna ends up hitting the AK-47 and gets the win. Now, apparently, Taryn Terrell and Gail Kim have a long history together, and I'm guessing they're rekindling it. So, like I said, a decent match. Good way to start off the show. Up next, we have Bruce Pritchard coming out to explain what's going to happen with the world title. So he comes out and he basically talks about all the issues the company's had over the past year and its ups and downs, and wants to thank the people for being there and staying with the company throughout the entire time. He announced that Alberto El Patron relinquished the title, and it's being returned to its former champion, Bobby Lashley. So Pritchard calls out Lashley, but out comes Jim Cornette. Now, I know most people think Jim Cornette's crazy, and believe me, they're not wrong. He's had a lot of negative comments about, well, Kenny Omega and a lot of people killing the business. Joey Ryan, I think, was one of them too. But this was a really, really good segment. So Cornette comes out, and apparently he was contacted by Anthem because they wanted somebody with experience to oversee things. So Bruce Pritchard and Cornette obviously go way back, so they kind of reminisce for a minute, and Bruce is just confused as to why he's out here. So Pritchard calls security. Security comes to the ring, and Cornette goes off on Pritchard, basically saying that he's worn out his welcome, he doesn't know what he's doing, so on and so forth, and says that if you were still working here, this would be an issue, but you're not. So Cornette fires Pritchard, and the crowd goes crazy, basically chanting, "Get the F out." So security escorts Pritchard out, and Jim Cornette says the landscape of TNA, Global Force Wrestling, Impact, whatever you want to call it, is going to change. And he goes on a tirade about how Alberto El Patron was stripped of the title and how he didn't relinquish it, and kind of says that, everybody needs to get their shit together because we're going to progress and do things better in the future. He kind of calls out Alberto about, like I said, his personal problems and things like that. So, yeah, good stuff. Really intense. He makes a 20-man gauntlet match for next week to determine a new champion. So this was the way that the title was first introduced into NWA TNA, is they had a gauntlet match for the belt, and I believe Ken Shamrock was the first champion of the company. So at this point, LAX comes out, and Konnan gets up into Cornette's face and says that Low-Ki should be the number one contender to whoever wins the gauntlet match. And now Cornette's like, I understand where you're coming from. I feel you. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to put Low-Ki in this gauntlet match. And he's going to be number 20. So he'll be the fresh man in. And Konnan goes back and forth, basically threatens Cornette, and they kind of go back and forth. It was a good segment. Like I said, really intense. LAX is a great presence. And yeah, good stuff. Can't complain about Cornette being here if this is what he's doing. Up next, we had the Super X Cup Finals with Xavier versus Ishimori. This was a good match. From what I've seen in the Super X Cup years past and whatnot, it's been good. Can't really complain about the talent. It's very high-end talent, and since now they have a working relationship with Pro Wrestling Noah of Japan, they've been able to implement some of that talent into the roster. It was basically a lot of back and forth throughout the match. Ishimori ended up hitting a 450 splash, and Xavier was able to kick out. There was a lot of close calls for Ishimori. He ended up charging at Xavier toward the end of the match and missed. Xavier hit him with a backflip overhead kick, for the win. And Desmond Xavier was interviewed by Jeremy Borash after the fact and said that he's putting the winner of the X Division match or X Division championship match later on notice. So he's basically saying, this is a big moment for me, but I want to make sure everybody else knows who I am. Next, we have a backstage segment with Karen Jarrett and Bruce Pritchard. As he's being escorted out of the building, the two of them arguing. Basically, she was saying that she wasn't the only one that couldn't stand him. So, not the biggest fan of Karen Jarrett, but what are you going to do? We also got another backstage segment about a goodbye statement from Grado. Apparently, he's being deported, from what I recall from the storyline. So, I forget what the other guy's name is that was with him, but he was basically saying that Grado's not going to be one of those guys that goes about it on the internet and tweets about it and says this is what's happening, but he's going to make an actual statement in the ring. So, we'll see what happens. Up next, we had the X Division Championship match. This was a really good match. I don't know too much about Trevor Lee. All I remember seeing about him was with, I don't know what their name was, but they were like the Helms crew or whatever when they were introduced during the, I think it was the tag team Apocalypto, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I know a lot about Sonjay Dutt. I saw him in a lot of his older work with TNA. And him winning the X Division title was a pretty big deal for him. I guess it was 20 years in the making, I think, is what they said. But yeah, this is, like I said, it was a great match. They did a couple of new things with the ladders. Otherwise, most of it was pretty standard. So toward the end of the match, Sonjay and Caleb were going up toward the ladder. Oh, sorry. I spoil it. Sonjay and Trevor were going up toward the... Oh, no, wait. What happened? Oh, I guess Trevor Lee got knocked down outside and was... Sonjay was going up toward up the ladder, and Caleb Conley comes out and knocks him off the ladder and puts him through a table. At this point, he's trying to get Trevor Lee back up to go into the ring to grab the belt, when Petey Williams comes out and hits Caleb with the Canadian Destroyer. So both of them end up leaving the ring, and Lee ends up getting back in the ring and starts up the ladder. At this point, Sonjay's still outside the ring. He jumps up on the apron, springboards off the ropes onto the ladder. He ends up getting the upper hand and pushes Trevor Lee off the ladder onto another ladder that was set up between the ladder and the ropes, and grabs the belt and retains the title. Like I said, good match. Great to see Petey Williams back. He was a big person in the X Division years ago, so having him back is going to be great. I know he was at House of Glory, I think, a couple weeks ago. I guess he made his return there. Maybe it was in House of Glory. Don't quote me on that. So then we had a backstage interview with Bobby Lashley, basically saying he's coming to destroy Matt Sydal, and then he's coming for that title. Next, we had the debut of Ohio versus Everything. I think they had promo videos playing the last couple of weeks, maybe, for the debut of these guys. They were taking on Jason Cade and Zachary Wentz, which I'm guessing they were just basically jobbers, because that's what the crowd started to chant. I think the crowd is one thing that gives GFW a bad name, because they're pretty much your stereotypical Southern crowd. So, yeah. But this was a decent match. There was a lot of sloppiness. I don't know if the guys were nervous or what was going on in the beginning of the match, but it started to smooth out, and we had a couple good spots. OVE got the win with a double team kick. Basically, one guy started on one side, the other guy started on the other side. One went high and the other one went low. It's kind of like a meet in the middle, like the DIY did, but obviously different. But a kick up top and a kick down low, and that's how they got the win. Next, we had a backstage segment with EC3 and Moose coming up to Cornette while he was on the phone, and they want to be in the gauntlet. And he says, yeah, you two will be in the gauntlet. Then Eli Drake and Chris Adonis come on, and they want to be in the gauntlet as well. So Eli Drake is going on telling Cornette all about himself and how he's number one. And Cornette looks over and he says, well, Chris Adonis, you're going to be in the match. And he says, Eli, you're going to be number one in the match because you're number one. So, should be interesting. I'm a big fan of gauntlet matches, so I really can't complain about that. And like I said, they've been adding a lot of new stuff. New guys, which we will get to. A pretty big debut coming later on. So up next, we have the main event, which pitted Bobby Lashley versus Matt Sydal. This was kind of a David versus Goliath match. Lashley, obviously, has been putting down Sydal recently, basically saying, he's not on his page, he's so much smaller, yada, yada, yada. So Sydal was able to get some early offense in. He hit a standing moonsault, and at this point, when he hit it and he went for the pin, Lashley kicked out right away. So there was no competition at that point. At this point, Lashley pretty much went on a tear for the match. He controlled a good portion of it. Sydal started using his speed to be able to gain momentum. But Lashley goes back to overpowering him. But Sydal won't stay down. So Lashley starts to get frustrated. He goes outside, grabs a chair, goes to hit Sydal with it, but the referee kind of stops him. So Lashley brushes the referee off. The referee moves off to the side in a daze. And at this point, Lashley had the chair in front of his face when Sydal hits him with a Van Terminator. Lashley goes down, but he wasn't in the right position for it, so Sydal had to move him closer to the ropes, or center of the ropes. And he went up and goes for a shooting star press. Lashley was able to put his knees up. At this point, Sydal gets thrown into the corner. Lashley goes for a spear. Sydal moves out of the way and rolls him up for a 3 count. Very surprising win. So, since Sydal won this match, he's able to challenge for whatever title he wants. So, don't know what he's going to do. Probably not X Division, because he really seemed to make it a point that he wasn't just a guy that was going to be in the X Division or light heavyweight, whatever you want to call it. So, we'll see. After the match, Lashley had his crew, or whatever you want to call them, in the first row, and they kind of attacked the referee. So Lashley told him, whoa, guys, you can't do that here. So that was kind of the end of the show, and then Jeremy Borash, or was it Josh Matthews, one of the two, saying, what do you mean roll the package? What are you talking about? And all of a sudden, we got a package promoting the debut of Johnny Mundo. Johnny Nitro, whatever you want to call him. It was shown on the teaser that Johnny Impact is coming. So, that's a pretty big name. I think a lot of people were hoping he would come back to the WWE, or possibly going elsewhere. He was in Lucha Underground and did a lot of good stuff for them. He worked in AAA and I think CMLL, and he's a big name. So, if TNA is bringing in names like this, like Petey Williams returning, and I'm sure we'll have more returns in this gauntlet match as well. They keep their selves out of the garbage, like with Patron and things like that. Even bringing Cornette in seems like a good idea right now. It was a really solid show overall. I'm definitely going to continue to watch it. Possibly continue to do these reviews if you guys like them. So, yeah. If you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe. Bye.